Hello folks. So if you saw the title of this video, this is pretty much my observation, my analysis, my interpretation of the three parties. Now, before we get into this, I'm going to let out a couple of disclaimers because I know anything political can go from very civil to savage in about a couple seconds. First off, most of this is not completely set in stone. Like I said, this is from my research, from my viewing, from my interpretation of how I see the three parties. And just to let you know, yes, there are three so far. Not the typical, not the commercialized, not the well paid usual two that you know of. Third and foremost, if you have a comment to this video, if you have something to say, whether something rubs you the wrong way, you agreed, disagreed, whatnot, let's keep it civil and message me instead. Because as soon as I already have a feeling that as soon as anyone makes a comment, that it's going to go once again from civil to savage. And the last thing I need is to have one of my most memorable posts be this video because everyone decided to argue amongst each other. This is for analysis. This is for my interpretation to be seen through all, not just to be, not to be completely set in stone. Which, at the same time, this is not set in stone. As, of course, you know, knowledge happens when you know something so far, you express it, and then when you know something a little bit more, you express it a little bit more. You go into detail. You go into deeper analysis. So please, please, by all means, this is not completely set in stone. Like I said, this is my views and everything. And on top of that, before we start with what politician does this, what politician does that, let's keep in mind that anyone who goes for any political position, especially if it's a high political position, one, already has a decent amount of money. Decent amount of money. And two, just because they're in politics does not make them a wholly good person. If in magic terms, and this is for my nerds out there, for magic terms, you pretty much have to, in order for you to be a politician, you have to be both, have the color of white and the color of black. Why? Because on one hand, you do want to care for people. You do want to take care for people. You do want to kind of look out for people. But at the same time, so for you to get in that position, you have to have some kind of ambition. And usually ambition is close to self-serving all the time. So it's that weird parallel of I'm willing to help people, but I'm also going to do this on my own goals, on my own way. And sometimes, as you already know, sometimes going that way can lead to either good results or bad results. So let's keep that in mind. Let's keep this balanced as we should try. Anyway, diving into it. So, my interpretation of the three parties starting now. First up, we have the Republicans. Now, the phrase I'm going to use for Republicans is that if Republicans were creating a game, they'd create the game to where the best player should win. Now, to them, who are the best players? Since they're mostly old school, they're quite traditional. The best players are mostly known as people who are hardworking, so pretty much mixture of blue collar and business people most of the time. The best players are the people who try to make something of themselves. The best player is also happens to be an American. They're very traditionalist. They're God-fearing. They're the straight up traditional American that they view as the best player. Now, that's the good news about my interpretation of Republicans. The bad news about my interpretation of Republicans is, however, that from what I've seen, sometimes how they view the best player could be a little bit too selective. For instance, American. traditional, God fearing. We got that. Or just love for God, love Christianity, the original American religion and spirituality. But if it's outside those laws, as usual, the other players are most likely shunned. For instance, there's been a little bit of toss to the LGBT community. They have done some things to where to where certain people of that community cannot marry, and in some cases can even be fired for being part of that community. Bad part. Another bad part that I've noticed about Republicans is how I like to say it, the view on being a traditional American. Traditional American means you're born here, but born here versus possibly came over here and born here but don't have any papers could be a little bit confusing. Yes, I'm talking about immigration. I'm talking about possible illegal immigration. There are some things, there's some ways of illegal immigration that I can see to where we might need a strong hand in, but then there are other places to where when you look at pretty much the sum of how they got here, what they had to strive for and everything, kind of why not? Why pretty much boot them back to the proverbial hell that they tried to escape? And in some cases, may not be able to change because possibly in that government, they are really vicious to the point of really vicious, really corrupt to the point of, that you cannot do any change over there. And if you try to do, guess what happens? So we have those. We have pretty much Republicans, straight up the quote, the phrase, the page that I link with Republicans is they want the best player to win. Their perception. Number two, the Democrats. If they were to make the game, they'd make the game. They make the game to where everyone would win. How do they show that? Besides massive equality, which I'm all for, they're going for close to free healthcare or tax-paid healthcare, close to free education or tax-paid education, and that's one I'm forgetting. And raising up the minimum wage to where no matter what job you go for, you are pretty much paid. Now, those are the good parts. And in some ways, I can lean to some of those good parts because, yes, it would be nice to have some insurance just in case something bad happens. Yes, it would be nice for people to freely go into the education system and learn something and not have to hover over about how much debt they paid in when it may have not been the best decision to go into, or if that might have been, or they might have been gypped by their education. I've heard some folks to where they go into education looking for this said thing, and then they kind of get gypped just because they could have just maybe learned that from online courses or staying at home or whatnot. And raising up the minimum wage so that everyone pretty much can have don't have to worry about finances as much. And I think I can be okay with that part only because when you look deep down into it, if everyone's pretty much paid a livable wage, you'd see a lot more people go with, okay, I need to get this job because I need to get paid, and actually go for the job that they are interested in, that they actually like. Because let's be honest, there are times where we want to pursue a certain job, but the other half of that is I can't really afford to go that route. It's probably bunches of people that want to be, artists and writers and all this stuff. And some of that does come with technique and learning your craft and everything. But the other half is, you know, I'd really like to do this, but I don't think I'd be able to make money off of that. As you know, in this great capitalistic like society we live in, If you cannot pay rent, you get booted out. And that's always why Americans are cautioned about money, because rule number one, money has to be coming in. But, so what are the bad things about that? Well, let's see here. First thing that I see, if this happens, and I'm not saying it happened yet, so please hold yourself, is first things I can see is the possible concept of balance. As we already know, America is already deeply in debt. And if we, however, do some of those things, where is the balance coming from? And in some cases, the balance could be like, well, we could focus on ourselves for a little bit. That'd be a good change. However, if we do not focus on ourselves for a little bit, if we do not build up substantial value during that time, odds are we might need deeper help from a foreign country. And not putting out any countries' names, but if we take certain deeper help from that other country, odds are we might as well start learning the languages of that country just because we needed them that much. That's part two. That's part one of that. Part two that I see the issue of this is it's basically close to the utopia feel. And as you know, utopia is like pretty much this perfect world where everything is going awesome. It's great. And I can dig that. But I also know that there's been multiple movies of picture utopia. You know how many movies picture utopia where things go bad? A lot. From Equilibrium to Equals. There's to like even futuristic movies. Sure, there's a point to where like there's a great balance in everything, but that means there's also a great cost. And that great cost means for that utopia to be okay, that means either everyone has to go in that same direction or they be shunned. And depending on how and when they are shunned, it could look bad on us. Now, I'm not saying communism because let's face it, one half I can see the great fear, but the other half is when in all of American history, even when a Democrat ran, was it 100% communistic? Let's be honest about this. Do research. Yes, we've had close calls, or yes, we've had close times, but be honest. When was the last time this nation was 100% communist? Okay, so once we understand that, but I can see the fear of that. I can see how that can happen. Ergo, those are the points to where I see Democrats right there. So Democrats, if they were creating a game, they create the game where everyone would win. And I just pretty much explain both the good side of that and the bad side of that. Now, last party we're getting into. This party you may not believe in or don't even know exists is the Libertarian Party. Now, the reason you may not hear much about this party is because, one, unlike the first two parties that I mentioned, they're not really highly funded or highly televised. Let me repeat that and let that sink in. This party is not highly funded or highly televised. It's like for some reason they want you to think there's only two options. Use your head. With that being said, the other part of this party that I think is mostly feared is because of the fact of their way of going about how they do things. So, libertarians, if I had to give them a quote, they're the players that wanted to have less interference so that everyone can play and enjoy this game. And what do I mean by interference? What do I mean by less interference? Less government. Their belief, from what I've researched, from what I've seen, is that if less government was happening, or at least less big brother government was to happen, we'd probably all be fine. We'd probably be able to keep our federal taxes. We'd probably have less interference with doing certain things. We'd all be pretty peachy, pretty keen. And to even kind of go a little bit deeper into this, um, everyone remembers The Purge, right? The movie The Purge, to where if everything was legal for 24 hours, people were thinking like, oh, I could murder this person, I could rob this person. But people forget the good side of certain things being completely legal, such as maybe running a business with less red tape, less paper, you know? Maybe actually getting a gun without doing, yeah, without worrying about background checks, getting a gun that you can afford without worrying about waiting on the background checks or all that other stuff. Being able to use your gun to properly defend yourself without worrying about certain things. Now, that's the good part about this party, is that they want to make the rules to where everyone can enjoy the game. I mean, even with even with pretty much legalized weed across the board, legalized cannabis, however you feel. I mean, that's pretty much like less leeway, less problems, less things coming in. So like I pretty much like there. Libertarians, less interference, aka less government, and a little bit less rules, so everyone can enjoy and play this game. Good side of that. Bad side of that is when this happens, and of course, I mentioned big government. I didn't mean small government. I probably don't mean cops, and I don't mean firefighters. We probably need them still to be paid handsomely for what they do. But amid that, the bad side that I can see that people might fear is this could be close to Wild Wild West eras, because if everyone agrees, if everyone plays along, if everyone be's nice to each other, then they could work out very nicely. But if not, this could be like Red Dead Redemption 2, to where pretty much if you don't have a gun, if you don't have something to defend yourself, and you get taken out, not many people might come for you. I mean, sure, you got family, you got friends, and if, of course, a cop does see it, they got you. But odds are it'd be close to the Wild Wild West over here. And I can see the possible fear and confusion how that happens. But, like I mentioned, interpretation, my views. So, libertarians want less interference, less government, and maybe a couple of less rules so that everyone can enjoy and play this game. With that being said, that is the it for those three parties. Please, like I said, if you have any comments, something you like, something you didn't like, something you wanted to talk about, something you want to touch on, please let me know by messaging me. Do not comment. You can do the status, you can like the status, hate the status. That I don't care about. I just want to get my thoughts out there, because some of this stuff here, y'all acting quite retarded about some of these parties here. Like these parties that y'all into, let it be known that it's supposed to be working for the American people, not against. And also let's add on that anything that divides the American people is most of the time against the American people. And that is, setting aside the whole good versus evil kind of thing. Of course, I'm going to go for good. For sure, I'm going to go for good. But some of this stuff is just, as soon as this happens, y'all literally putting them in, the dark parts. And I think that's taking it too far. To end this video with that adage, I'm also going to add pretty much a quote from the great Jordan B. Peterson, bleh. And I might be paraphrasing, but the quote pretty much goes that he was in a conversation with politics, and he mentioned that both parties, and slightly hated that he forgot the third party, but he mentioned that both parties are correct. It's just that what is correct at this time, what is needed at this time. And that even shows pretty much his balance on some of the subjects. I guess showing his balance on how independent he was of the parties. Because there are times to where I can see to where we might need to be a little bit more Republican-like. There are times where I can see we might need a more democratic view. And even though it may be a long, long time before we get a libertarian view, it may be a time that I think we may need to go libertarian. I mean, just because it could be needed, you know? But we have to balance it out. So remember, I'm quite neutral on these three parties. I might lean toward one or two, but on those points, please let me know what you think by messaging me, not commenting. You can like this post, hate this post, but if you want to talk, if you want to leave a comment, you want to label what you think, talk to me first. All right? Hope you have an awesome day. Deuces.